Welcome, learner, to the deep dive. So, imagine you build this totally flawless machine, right?
Okay, I'm picturing it.
You follow this incredibly complex blueprint, you put all the pieces together, and it just runs beautifully.
Right, a total success.
Exactly. So then you copy that exact same blueprint to build a new model, expecting the exact same perfect result. But instead, it instantly self-destructs the moment you turn it on.
Oh, well, just immediately.
Immediately, and not because your math was wrong or anything, but because the raw materials themselves, suddenly decided to change the fundamental rules of physics on you.
That sounds incredibly frustrating. But I think I know where you're going with this.
Right. Today, we are looking at this absolutely fascinating journal from an open source software engineer who hit exactly this wall.
Yeah, but not with a piece of faulty code, right?
No, actually, he hit this wall with breeding highly aggressive African cichlids.
Which is such a wild pivot. We are diving into a profoundly detailed hobbyist blog today. The author goes by Eng, and he describes himself as an old software plumber who spends his nights tinkering with floss.
And for any of you listening who might not know the acronym, FLOSS stands for Free, Libre, and Open Source Software.
Exactly, and that background is just, well, it's the perfect lens for this deep dive.
I mean, a software plumber is basically someone who fixes the unseen leaks in a system, right? Like the underlying architecture that keeps a program from crashing.
Yeah, the unglamorous but totally essential stuff.
Yeah.
And Aang applies this exact same meticulous iterative mindset to his hobby.
He keeps a highly detailed public journal of his fish keeping, and the source material we are pulling from today is just titled Notes on Fish Keeping.
But the detail that really sets the stage here, the thing that tells you exactly who we're dealing with, is the subtitle.
Oh yeah, this is part 214.
Right, part 214. I mean, that tells you immediately that you are dealing with a mind that categorizes documents and analyzes every single variable.
Totally. In the open source software world, progress is just made through relentless iteration. You write a piece of code, you run it, you log the bugs, you patch it, and you try again.
And Aang treats his aquariums exactly like that. They're a living, breathing operating systems to him.
So our mission today, for you, the learner, is to extract the core insights from this incredibly specific journal. We're going to explore how unique biological traits require highly specialized environments.
And how an analytical engineering brain tackles the sheer, messy unpredictability of nature.
Exactly, because by the end of this, I promise you're going to see aquarium design and, honestly, probably even the daily environments you build for yourself through a completely different lens.
So to understand the bottleneck Aang is facing in part 214, we really first need to look at his previous data.
Right, because he's not some novice who just bought his first glass tank at the pet store.
Not at all. He has a proven track record. He's successfully bred several varieties of cichlids, already specifically jewel, zebra, and polar parrot cichlids.
So he studied their parameters, he built the environment, and the system functioned perfectly. He basically had a stable working code base.
Yeah, the blog even mentions he is currently working through the process with apistogramma.
Oh, right, which are a completely different type of dwarf cichlid.
Right, exactly. And they require incredibly delicate, highly specific water conditions. So he absolutely knows how to manage complex variables.
But then, and here's where the system crash happens, he introduces two specific new species into his operation, the golden Mbuna and the giraffe cichlid.
And everything just falls apart.
He writes very plainly that breeding these two requires a completely different strategy. Everything he knew before is just void.
And, a lesser aquarist might just blame the fish, right? Like, oh, I bought a bad batch. Or they might just stubbornly keep running the same routine, hoping the fish eventually adapt to the tank.
But Aang doesn't do that. He stops and analyzes the failure. He recognizes that the fundamental nature of these new subjects literally breaks his previous models.
Yeah, the hardware itself is different.
That's such a great way to put it. In software development, when a program throws a critical error, you really have to look at whether the issue is a bug in your code or a limitation of the hardware you're running it on.
Right, and Aang realizes he is dealing with a hardware difference here.
And that mindset is incredibly valuable for you, no matter what field you work in. Assuming that a template that brought you success in the past will just automatically scale to a new challenge, I mean, that's a classic trap.
It really is. True problem solving requires adapting to the raw data sitting right in front of you.
And the raw data sitting in front of Aang right now is, well, it's highly aggressive.
Very aggressive. The hardware difference causing the system failure isn't just some minor behavioral quirk. It is the intense, unrelenting reproductive strategy of these specific fish.
Because golden Mbuna and giraffe cichlids are polygamous.
Exactly. And that biological imperative dictates literally everything that follows. You absolutely cannot take the standard approach of putting a single male and a single female in a tank together.
Right. If you apply that traditional monogamous template to these cichlids, the outcome is fatal.
Yes, brutal. The male's evolutionary drive to spawn is just constant.
So in the wild, a dominant male would normally patrol this massive stretch of territory, right? Like interacting with dozens of females across a huge body of water.
Right, but when you compress that massive natural territory into a tiny enclosed glass box, that energy has nowhere to go.
So if there's only one female in that confined space...
All of that intense, aggressive energy is directed solely at her.
Yeah.
Without any pause.
Oh, wow. So it's a relentless pursuit that quickly becomes physically dangerous for the female.
Exactly. So Ang notes that the mandatory solution for this biological reality is establishing a harem ratio.
A harem ratio, meaning you have to stock the tank with one male to every 3 to 5 females.
Yes. And when I read this, honestly, my brain immediately went to how network engineers manage web traffic using load balancing.
Oh, that is such a good analogy, because the underlying mechanics of both systems are remarkably similar.
Right. Like if a website suddenly goes viral and millions of users try to access a single server at the exact same time.
That server is going to overheat and crash. It simply cannot handle that concentrated demand.
Exactly. So to prevent a crash, network engineers implement load balancers to distribute that incoming traffic evenly across a cluster of multiple servers.
So no single machine gets pushed beyond its breaking point.
Yeah. And Ang is applying biological load balancing here. By distributing the dominant male's relentless attention across a harem of 4 or 5 females, no single female fish gets targeted to the point of exhaustion.
That makes so much sense. But I do want to push back on this a little bit, or at least look deeper into the intention behind the strategy.
Sarah, what are you thinking?
Well, we have to ask, is this ratio purely about mitigating the male's bullying so you can maintain a peaceful-looking aquarium in your living room? Or is there a more severe biological necessity at play here?
Oh, the text definitely implies it's purely about physical survival. You aren't teaching the golden Mbuna male to be gentle. You can't rewrite his genetic code.
Right, you're just mathematically engineering the population ratio to absorb that natural force safely.
Exactly. You design the parameters of the system so that its inherent behavior doesn't destroy it from the inside out.
It's basically functional math applied directly to biology.
It really is. But surviving that aggressive mating phase is just the initial hurdle.
Right, because once the eggs are actually fertilized, the biological demands on the female shift dramatically, and the system faces an entirely new set of extreme challenges.
Yeah, the narrative of Ang's journal turns into a full-on biological marathon at this point.
Because these specific cichlids are mouthbrooders, right?
Yes. The mating ritual ends abruptly once the eggs are fertilized. There is no co-parenting, no shared nest guarding like you see in some other species.
The relationship is just over.
Over. The female immediately gathers the fertilized eggs and carries them inside her mouth.
And Ang specifically notes she holds them in the buccal cavity.
Right, the buccal cavity, which is essentially this expandable throat pouch. She doesn't just hold the eggs passively behind her teeth or something.
She secures them deep in this cavity to protect them.
Yes, and she will carry them there for an incubation period lasting anywhere from 2 to 4 weeks.
Okay, wait, let's unpack this for the learner, because this is wild. She gathers all of her potential offspring into her throat, and because her mouth is entirely occupied with keeping them safe, she basically fasts for up to a month.
She goes completely without food for weeks on end, yes.
Wow. And the most intense part of this equation is that this voluntary starvation is happening while that dominant male is still patrolling that exact same tank, right?
Oh, yeah. He is constantly looking to initiate the spawning process again with the other females.
That is just, I mean, consider the immense evolutionary trade-off she's making there.
It's massive. She is deliberately suppressing her fundamental instinct to swallow and eat, choosing extreme physical depletion just to ensure maximum safety for her offspring.
Because in a natural ecosystem, keeping the eggs in her mouth protects them from all the predators looking for a free meal.
Exactly. But this biological imperative also renders her entirely defenseless. She cannot bite back if attacked. She is rapidly losing physical energy due to the fast. Her only viable defense mechanism is to hide.
So if her biology absolutely refuses to let her protect herself, the physical architecture of the environment has to do the heavy lifting.
That is exactly the shift. The design of the aquarium transforms from just interior decorating into building a functional panic room.
Basically designing an escape room for fish?
Yeah. A bare glass tank, or even one with just a few decorative plastic plants, is a literal death sentence in this scenario.
Because the female cannot escape the male's line of sight.
Right. If she is visible, his spawning aggression just continues. And if she's constantly harassed while starving and carrying eggs, her physical system simply gives out from the stress and exhaustion.
So Ang writes that the environment setup is a strict non-negotiable requirement here.
Completely non-negotiable. The tank needs plenty of rocks, sand, and artificial caves.
The source notes they love sifting through the substrate like the sand at the bottom of the tank. But the caves are the critical survival element, aren't they?
The caves are everything. These artificial caves serve as dedicated safety areas. They break the male's line of sight and provide a permanent safe haven for these exhausted, fasting females to just retreat into and recover.
So we are seeing biology dictate physical engineering in real time.
Exactly. The behavioral trait of polygamous aggression, combined with the reproductive trait of fasting while mouthbrooding, demands a highly specific architectural response.
But physical barriers are only half of the environmental equation, right? Because the internal chemistry of the tank is just as vital.
Oh, absolutely.
Mm.
Ang points out that heavy filtration is an absolute must.
He notes that cichlids produce massive amounts of waste, and keeping the water impeccably clean is often the primary trigger for successful breeding.
But let's look at the underlying mechanics of why that filtration is so critical, because it's not just about the water looking pretty and clear to the human eye.
Right. In an enclosed aquatic system, fish waste and uneaten food break down into ammonia, which is highly toxic.
And because cichlids have a high bioload, meaning they consume a lot of protein and produce a huge amount of waste, those ammonia levels can spike rapidly.
So a heavy filtration system doesn't just act as a physical sieve for the dirt, it acts as a biological engine.
Yes. The filter houses beneficial bacteria that literally consume that toxic ammonia and convert it into less harmful compounds.
So if the filtration system cannot handle the heavy bioload generated by that harem ratio we talked about, the 1 male to 5 females, the water just becomes toxic.
And the fish experience immediate physiological stress.
And stressed fish do not breed. Plus, a fasting female carrying eggs in a toxic environment will just quickly succumb to illness.
Exactly. Furthermore, in the wild, an influx of highly oxygenated, clean water often mimics the arrival of seasonal rains.
Oh, which is a natural environmental trigger that tells the fish, hey, it is a safe, resource-rich time to reproduce.
Precisely. Every single element of this environment is deeply interconnected.
Their digestive biology demands the heavy biological filtration.
Their reproductive biology necessitates the architectural safety of the caves.
And their social biology requires the mathematical load balancing of the harem ratio.
If even one of these engineered parameters fails, the entire ecosystem just crashes.
Which brings us perfectly to Ang's major realization in part 214.
Yeah, this is the turning point.
Because he analyzes his current setup, he runs the data, and he openly admits it is failing.
He writes that both his fish ratios and his physical environments are falling short of what the golden Mbuna and giraffe cichlids require.
And admitting a systemic failure like that requires a significant amount of intellectual humility, particularly from someone who has a documented history of success with other complex species.
It really does. It's so easy to get defensive.
But he knows he needs to adjust in the coming days. And his solution isn't just to apply some minor patch. He doesn't suggest buying a slightly stronger water filter or throwing like one more plastic cave into the glass tank.
No, he goes for a massive structural pivot. He is contemplating moving these fish out of his traditional indoor aquariums entirely.
Right. His plan is to relocate them into outdoor ponds built from EPS foam boxes.
EPS foam, which is expanded polystyrene. To picture it, think of incredibly dense, thick packaging foam, like a really heavy-duty cooler.
So he's basically building outdoor coolers for his fish.
Basically, yes. And using this material for an outdoor pond is actually a brilliant engineering choice for a few specific reasons.
Okay, let's hear them.
First, it allows you to create a significantly larger volume of water at a fraction of the cost of buying massive, custom glass aquariums.
Okay, that makes sense. More space for the load balancing.
Exactly. But the real genius of the EPS foam is its thermal properties. You are taking tropical fish and placing them outdoors.
Right, which sounds dangerous.
It would be. But expanded polystyrene is an exceptional insulator. It acts as a thermal buffer, protecting the water volume from those wild temperature swings between the heat of the day and the chill of the night.
So it maintains the stable climate these fish require to survive outside. That is so clever.
It really is. And this pivot perfectly encapsulates that open source software mentality we discussed at the very beginning.
Because he identified a hard bottleneck. The current version of his hardware, the indoor glass tank, was fundamentally incapable of supporting the biological program he was trying to run.
Exactly. And instead of falling victim to the sunk cost fallacy.
Stubbornly trying to force a broken system to work just because he already invested time and money into the glass tanks.
Right. He just admits the framework is flawed. His solution is to radically scale up. He moves them to massive outdoor foam boxes to provide the physical space and the water volume that the biological math literally demands.
There is such a profound lesson here for you, the listener, because it is incredibly easy to get trapped by the sunk cost of our own environments.
Oh, absolutely.
You might have spent months designing a workflow for your team at the office, or heavily invested in a specific daily routine that used to work perfectly.
But when the data tells you the environment is wrong, when the system starts crashing under new variables, you have to be willing to scrap the old model and build a larger, more capable system.
So let's zoom out and review the mechanics of this journey we've been on today. We started by examining a really highly specific challenge within the niche world of fish keeping.
Right. We explored the intense biological imperatives of the golden Mbuna and giraffe cichlids.
Their unrelenting polygamous drive and that grueling, month-long fasting endurance required by the female to mouthbrood her young.
And we saw how those unchangeable, inherent traits demanded incredibly precise environmental engineering, because you simply cannot negotiate with the raw nature of the fish.
You must implement load balancing through mathematical harem ratios.
You must construct architectural panic rooms to ensure physical safety.
You must utilize heavy biological filtration to manage the invisible toxicity of the system.
And ultimately, when the glass box proves too small to contain those variables, you have to be willing to engineer a thermally insulated outdoor pond.
The core takeaway from Eng's journal is absolute. You cannot fight inherent nature, but you can meticulously design the environment to manage it.
And that principle translates directly to the complex systems you navigate every single day.
Exactly. If you're managing a difficult team project with competing personalities, or attempting to build a new habit, or navigating a highly stressful period in your personal life, success rarely comes from forcing a rigid, one-size-fits-all approach.
It comes down to recognizing the specific environmental triggers that are required for the system to actually function.
If a colleague is constantly overwhelmed, telling them to simply work harder ignores the hardware limitation, right? You need to load balance their responsibilities.
Or, if you find yourself exhausted and vulnerable, forcing yourself to remain in the center of a chaotic environment is just going to lead to burnout.
You need to build architectural safety caves into your schedule. Dedicated, non-negotiable time to retreat, break the line of sight, and recover.
You have to engineer your environment to support the reality of your situation, not the fantasy of how you wish the system operated.
AIM's approach teaches us that to succeed with unpredictable, messy variables, you really have to analyze the data like a coder, but build the solutions like an architect.
Because the environment dictates the survival of the system.
Well said. As we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over today. We have seen how a precisely engineered environment, down to the chemical filtration, the placement of the rocks, and the mathematical ratio of companions, can completely dictate the success, failure, and literal survival of these complex biological behaviors.
It really does put things into perspective.
It makes you wonder how much of your own daily behavior, your chronic stress levels, and your overall productivity is just a direct, predictable product of the tank you have built for yourself. Keep analyzing your environment and keep diving deep.